Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 5. Academy Days. Konoha 10 years after Kyuubi attack. It was Naruto's 4th year in the academy and he was highly bored with it. He honestly thought that he just went to a regular school for civilians half the time with all of these boring subjects. It was killing him on the inside. Naruto sighed as he looked around the classroom and observed his classmates. He noted how they had all changed in their own way. Shino didn't really change all that much, except he had gotten taller. Naruto was able to become one of Shino's good friends after he had just brushed a bug off of his shoulder instead of squishing it like most of the other kids. This led to Shino approaching him and questioning his actions, where Naruto told him that the bug wasn't bothering him so there was no need to crush it. Shino also accepted the fact that Naruto hated wasps, a hatred they deeply shared. Naruto was able to become a good friend with Choji. He was able to connect with the Akamichi because of their love to eat. Currently, their ramen showdown had them tied at 18 bowls, and they were determined to outdo each other. Becoming Shikamaru's friend was fairly easy. All he had to do was spend a day with him and do some cloud watching. It also helped that they played a few shogi games every once in a while. Naruto always fumed when he couldn't beat Shikamaru, which was every time. Ino also became one of Naruto's friends after a certain incident. The young Yamanaka was being teased about her lack of taijutsu skill and was on the verge of tears. Naruto, hating to see anyone bullied, stepped in and defended her. After he drove the bullies away, the two blondes talked for a while. They found out that they each had a hobby in gardening. Naruto had decided on adding a few flowers in his apartment to make it seem more homey. Ino had offered to give him help once in a while and they become friends after a while. Kiba was difficult. Naruto had tried to become his friend, but the Inuzuka didn't want to because of his standing in the class. Naruto was in the middle, but Kiba was towards the bottom, close to the position of the dead last. His pride wouldn't let him accept it and he tried to surpass Naruto every day, only to fail most of the time. At least Akamaru liked the Uzumaki. Sasuke was one of the people Naruto couldn't connect with. After the Uchiha massacre, where Itachi, Sasuke's brother, had killed the entire clan save for him, Sasuke fell into a state of being the lone wolf. He never wanted to associate with anyone, and belittled others for any small mistake. Naruto wanted to become his friend because he knew about what it felt like to be alone, but gave up trying after dealing with the emo's attitude for a while. Then there was Sakura Haruno, daughter of Mebuki Haruno of the Civilian Council. She had hated Naruto with a passion after the very first day they started the academy. Naruto believed that it was because he had tied with Sasuke after their first match, but knew that it was also because of all the lies her parents had told her. He had met the Harunos, and knew that they hated him with a passion. He knew because they threw everything they had at him when he walked in front of their house, even the kitchen sink. And finally, there was Hinata, Naruto's first friend. She had gotten better with her training with the Hyugas and with her confidence. Naruto had found it strange that she would blush and stutter a lot when he was around, more than usual, but couldn't figure it out for the life of him. He had remembered the day when her strange behavior had started so clearly. Flashback 2 years ago. Naruto and Hinata were let out of the academy for the day and were about to go to a dango shop to celebrate passing their test. The two kids hadn't even left the academy when trouble seemed to find them. "Why are you still in the academy, Hinata-sama?" a voice asked from behind them, laced with disgust. The two turned around to see Neji Hyuga, Hinata's cousin who Naruto had the pleasure of meeting when he went to the Hyuga compound once. Their first meeting was pleasant. "En Neji ni-san," Hinata said as he glared at her, making her flinch. Naruto then stepped in front of Hinata and gave Neji a glare of his own. "What do you want, Tem?" Naruto asked. "I'm just wondering why a weakling like her is still trying to be a ninja," Neji said as he crossed his arms. "There is no hope for someone as weak as her in this world. Fate has decreed it." Naruto scoffed and said, "Fate's mate, none of that destiny stuff is real." Neji glared at him and said, "Those are the words of a fool who doesn't know his place in life. Hinata-sama will always be weak and worthless. It's because of her kindness, isn't it?" Naruto asked. Neji nodded and said, "Yes, her compassion for others will be her undoing. Naruto closed his eyes and said, I don't believe so, Hinata-chan's kindness is her strength. Hinata looked up at Naruto with awe as he continued, she is kind because she is a caring person. She wants to help all of the people she meets, even if it hurts her in the process. Hinata-chan cares for you, but you just don't want to realize it. So go and play with your beliefs of fate and all that junk. But when your fate fails you, don't come crying to me. With that, Naruto took Hinata's hand in his own, making her blush, and left the academy, leaving the fuming Neji behind them. Naruto-kun, Hinata thought, you are so kind to me, so helpful. You're someone I would want to spend my life with. You make me feel so calm and happy all the time. Maybe I should talk to Ka-chan about this. Hinata just blushed and had a small smile on her face as she and Naruto made their way to the dango shop. Flashback end. Naruto was jolted out of his thoughts when Iruka and Mizuki walked inside the classroom. Each one was sporting a few faded bruises and a couple of shallow cuts. Iruka-sensei, what happened to you guys? Naruto asked. Iruka smiled and rubbed the back of his head. Well, me and Mizuki had a little spar yesterday. And we kinda went overboard with all the fighting. Over the years, Iruka had his opinion of Naruto changed after the Sandyame made him spend the day with the little Uzumaki. He had become nicer to him, except for when he was left to pay the bill at Ichiraku's whenever Iruka took Naruto there. While he was appalled at how much ramen Naruto could stuff into himself, his world was broken when he saw that Hinata could eat more ramen than Naruto. What's this? Business. You were the one who was throwing 20 kunai at me. Mizuki protested. Which one of us threw 2 Fuma shuriken, at the same time? Iruka shot back. Mizuki just blushed and turned around while whistling innocently. Everyone began to snicker at their sensei's argument. Iruka then decided to get on with today's lesson. Okay class, we're going to be going over our history of the Shodaime. This had caught Naruto's attention. He always wanted to learn more about the Shodaime since he was the only Konoha shinobi that had seen the Jongu in action. He was currently fighting for second place of his list of favorite Hokages. First place going to his idol the Yondaime for saving the village from the Kyuubi. His Jiji was fighting the Shodaime for second place, he was the one who had given him his special gift. Can anyone tell me what noticeable events happened with the Shodaime besides him founding the village? Iruka asked. Sasuke raised his hand so Iruka picked him. The Shodaime battled Madara Uchiha in the Valley of the End where he defeated Madara, even after he summoned the Kyuubi no Kitsune, Sasuke said. All of his fangirls just gushed over everything he said. Correct. Now can anyone tell me what else the Shodaime did? Iruka asked. This time, Naruto raised his hand. He was able to drive off an S-rank ninja from Tokigakure when they tried to assassinate him, Naruto said. Where did you hear that? That's not in the textbooks, Iruka said. Naruto Baka probably made it up, Sakura huffed, causing everyone, even Sasuke, to stiffen before they sent glances to Hinata. Naruto was ready to restrain Hinata before she turned Sakura into paste, however, Iruka spoke up and drew everyone's attention to him. Naruto, can you tell us where you heard about that particular story? I haven't heard of it so I'm a little curious, Iruka said. Jiji told me, Naruto began, he was talking about the Shodaime one day and mentioned that he was targeted by many nations. The most noticeable one being an S-rank ninja from Taki. He never told me the ninja's name though. Okay class, I'll go and ask the Hokage about it and tell you all tomorrow, Iruka informed them. Hyuga compound later. The academy had let out for the day and Naruto and Hinata were walking to the Hyuga compound. Hinata's family had invited Naruto over for dinner, and even though he refused, Hitomi wouldn't take no for an answer. Both kids had entered the compound, and after greeting the guards, headed for garden where they knew Hitomi would be. True to their thoughts, Hitomi was relaxing in the garden with a baby Hanabi in her lap. There was a big scare when Hanabi was born. Hitomi was starting to lose too much blood and was on the verge of death. But thanks to the efforts of Tsunade, she was able to pull through. She had to take it easy for a while, but is currently in good health. Hello Ka-chan, Hanabi-chan, Hinata greeted. Hina, Nato, Hanabi said as she waved to the two. Naruto just sighed, he would never be able to get her to learn to correctly pronounce his name. "Hello Hinata-chan, Naruto-kun," Hitomi said as she stood up. "Learn my name," Naruto yelled at Hanabi. The 4-year-old just giggled in response. "Nato," she giggled, causing Hinata and Hitomi to do the same. Naruto just hung his head as a cloud of depression began to rain on him. "Come on Nato-kun, why don't you tell us about your day?" Hitomi teased. Naruto looked at her in horror while Hinata just fell to the floor laughing. Would you like to be called N Nato-kun, or Phi Fishcake-kun?" Hinata asked while holding in her laughter. "Not you too Hinata-chan," Naruto wailed. None of the women could take it anymore and they fell to the ground laughing. "Something amusing happened?" Hiyashi asked as he was drawn outside by the laughter. "Tell them to stop making fun of me," Naruto pleaded. Hiyashi just smirked and said, "Now ladies, it's not nice to make fun of Naruto-san's name." All of the women just stared at him while Naruto grinned in triumph. "Without inviting me to witness it happening," Hiyashi finished. Naruto just stared at him in shock while the females just fell back into a laughing mess. After everyone recovered, they looked around to see Naruto found him over by a shrub wallowing in depression. Sorry Naruto-kun," Hinata said as she saw the depressed blonde. "It's fine Hinata-chan," Naruto told her as he stood up. "I was just playing around with you all." Hiyashi sighed and said, "I should have known, that prankster side of yours is getting more mischievous each day." "What can I say? Pranking is fun," Naruto exclaimed with a large grin. "As long as you don't prank my family, meaning me, my wife, and daughters, then I give you free rein," Hiyashi said. Naruto just gave him a smile while there was a mischievous glint in his eye. Next day, Naruto slid into his desk with Hinata on his right, Shikamaru and Choji behind him, and Shino and Ino in front of him. He was able to get Shino to become a little bit social with the group. It wasn't much, but progress is progress. He also managed to get Ino over her little bit of fear for the Aburame. She was fine as long as his bugs didn't crawl onto her without her permission. "So Iruka-sensei, did Gigi tell you about the Taki shinobi?" Naruto asked when Iruka and Mizuki walked inside. "Yes he did," Iruka said. "I must say, you helped me get a good history lesson Naruto." Iruka smiled at the blonde, who pumped his fist into the air in triumph. "What did Hokage-sama tell you about that guy anyway?" Choji asked while munching on a bag of chips. Iruka took a deep breath and began. "Hokage-sama told me as much as he could remember since the incident happened when he was only a little older than you guys. Takigakure had sent an S-rank ninja to assassinate the Shodaime, one who was able to use the 5 basic elements of ninjutsu tirelessly. The Shodaime defeated him easily and demanded compensation from Taki." "Wow, who knew that the Shodaime was such a popular guy?" Ino commented. "Well, he did create the first hidden village and help make the basics for the shinobi system," Shikamaru pointed out. Iruka nodded and said, "Very good Shikamaru, seems like you've been studying really well." "Not really, I just remember that particular sentence from one of your boring lectures," Shikamaru said, earning a few laughs from the class. "Okay, all of you be quiet," Mizuki ordered, getting everyone to shut up. "Now let's get started on today's lesson. What did we have planned again?" "We're supposed to go over the history of the Senju clan," Iruka said as he dug through his desk and pulled out a textbook. "Isn't that the clan where the first 2 Hokages come from?" Naruto asked. Iruka nodded and said, "Yes, the Senju clan, which was one of the 2 clans that helped create the village along with the Uchiha clan." So the class went over their Konoha history for the rest of the day before they had a break for lunch and did shuriken training. Training Ground 27. Naruto had gotten out of the academy and was currently entering his private training area. He would have gone with Hinata again, but this was one of 3 days that he had dedicated to training with the Jongu. As he entered the training area, he saw that there was someone else there. "Iruka-sensei, what are you doing here?" Naruto asked. His teacher was leaning against one of the trees as he observed the many cuts in another one. "Well, Hokage-sama told me that you should clue me in on something since you seem to trust me so much," Iruka said. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Naruto said, lying through his teeth. "Actually Naruto-kun, I think that you can let Iruka know," Hiruzen said as he entered the clearing. Are you sure, Gigi? I mean, he never liked me in the beginning, Naruto said, making Iruka guilty at the way he treated Naruto. Don't worry about it. If I hear the villagers talking about your abilities, then we both will know that Iruka is to blame, Hiruzen said. Naruto sighed and said, okay Iruka-sensei, whatever you see here, you are not to tell anyone. Got it. Iruka, surprised by Naruto's seriousness of the moment, agreed. Naruto sighed and shrugged off his trenchcoat and showed Iruka the stitches on both of his forearms and the one that ran down his arm. Iruka was shocked to say the least, and even more so when he saw the mask attached to Naruto's back. What happened to you? Iruka cried. Nothing, Naruto said, this is something that I've had since I was born. So Naruto told Iruka the story that the Sandaime told him, causing the academy teacher to look at the Hokage in confusion. The aged leader just sent Iruka a look that he'll explain it later. So what is this? Iruka asked as he motioned to the stitches. Naruto just grinned and held out his arm. Iruka watched in amazement as crimson threads come out of Naruto's skin and began to wiggle around in the air. Naruto then launched his arm at the tree and pulled off an apple that was hanging on the branch. Remember the Taki ninja that attacked the Shodaime? Naruto asked. Iruka noted, so he continued. This was the special ability that he had. But Hokage-sama told me that he was only able to use all 5 elements, Iruka pointed out. I did, but that was one of the abilities that was granted to him by this special power, Hiruzen said. What do you mean? Iruka asked. I can take the hearts of my enemies and use their elemental affinities, Naruto said. But I can only use their primary affinity according to the scroll. That's a little creepy, Iruka said. Hiruzen chuckled and said, just wait for the next part. You'll probably be in shock. Iruka just looked at the Sandaime before looking back at Naruto. The boy had placed his hands in the Tora seal and began to concentrate. Jongu. Activate. Naruto cried as the mask on his back began to jump, pulling the skin with it. The stitching along Naruto's back opened up and his fire heart jumped out after morphing into its 9-tailed fox form. Iruka was about to panic, but a quick reassuring glacé from Hiruzen was all he needed to keep calm. Is this another ability of the Jongu? Iruka asked. Yup. I can make bodies for the hearts I get with my threads, isn't that awesome? Dabbeo. Naruto cried as he grinned. This is a really interesting ability. But can it help you with making a bunshin? Iruka asked with a smirk. Naruto just dropped his head in shame as he remembered that was his worst jutsu. What's this about the bunshin no jutsu? Hiruzen asked. It's my worst jutsu. Every time I try it, it fails. Naruto wailed. I keep telling you to put more chakra into it. Iruka yelled. I put as much chakra into it as possible. Naruto yelled back. Before the two could continue yelling, the sound of someone face palming could be heard. The two looked over to see the Hokage with a red handprint on his face as he looked at the two with annoyance. Naruto, instead of trying to put all your chakra into just one clone, try to make many clones, Hiruzen said. Try to make at least 20. Naruto looked at the old man with confusion but complied. He began to focus his chakra in the way he was supposed to when making clones, but instead of trying to make just one illusion, he focused on making at least 20 clones. Bunshin no jutsu. Naruto cried as the small clearing they were in was enveloped in a large cloud of white smoke. After a lot of coughing and hacking from everyone who had inhaled some of it, they opened their eyes and the two younger males dropped their jaws in shock. The field was filled to the brim with Naruto bunshins. There were bunshins in the trees, hanging off of tree branches, and there were even bunshins that were standing on top of one another. As I thought, Hiruzen muttered. But, how? He can't even make one. Iruka cried. Hiruzen sighed and said, the answer's simple, Naruto has more chakra than half the village. So when you kept telling him to put more chakra in the jutsu, you were unintentionally making him overload the jutsu. Ha, I knew I was awesome. Naruto cried as he ran around the field cheering. Iruka put his head down in shame and said, maybe we should check the chakra levels of students in the year we start going over chakra. I'll be sure to mention that in the next council meeting, Hiruzen said as he watched Naruto cheer with amusement. Naruto-kun, come here for a moment, Hiruzen said. Naruto jogged over to the Sandaime after he dispelled the bunshin and cleared the field of them. What's up, Gigi? Naruto asked as he grinned at him. The Hokage smiled and said, "Since you seem to have an abundance of chakra, I think I'll teach you a new jutsu." He held up a hand to stop the boy from celebrating. "However, I'll only teach you this jutsu if you can make at least 7 bunshin." Naruto grinned and said, "Get ready to teach me a new jutsu, Gigi." "I'll be waiting, it'll be a nice break from all the paperwork that I have to do," Hiruzen said with a chuckle. "Now then, I believe it's time I got back to my office," the Hokage said, preparing to do a shunshin. "Wait, Gigi," Naruto said, preventing him from leaving. "Is something wrong?" Iruka asked as he watched the blonde with worry in his eyes. "Yeah, I seem to know a jutsu, but I've never known about it before," Naruto said. "Maybe you're starting to activate another part of the Jongu," Hiruzen told him. When Naruto looked at him in confusion, he continued, "You were able to learn the jutsu that the person whose heart you took knows. My thoughts are that since you've matured some more mentally, you are starting to discover them. So I should start to know more jutsu now?" Naruto asked. "Yes, you will be discovering that you know jutsu that you originally didn't know," Hiruzen explained. "Promise me that you will be careful with any new jutsu, proper practice with them will help you to use them better." "Don't worry, Gigi, I promise," Naruto said as he gave the Sandaime a reassuring grin. The Hokage then vanished in a puff of smoke, leaving just Naruto and Iruka in the clearing. "Hey, Iruka-sensei," Naruto began, "does this mean that if I want to make just one clone, I just try to put in as little chakra as possible?" Iruka nodded and said, "Yes, and I'm sorry, if I had realized that you had more chakra than normal, I would have been able to properly help you." Naruto waved him off and told him, "It's fine. The important thing is that we know the problem now." "You know something, Naruto?" Iruka started, "I envy you." "You envy me?" Naruto asked. "Why would you be jealous of me?" Iruka smiled at him and said, "Because you're able to look on the bright side of everything. So how about I treat you to some ramen as a form of apology?" Now Naruto wouldn't accept any type of apology unless it was an oral one, but when it came to apology ramen, all his morals went out the window, especially if he was the one that didn't have to pay for any of it. "Yay, ramen, ramen, let's go get some ramen," Naruto sang as he began to skip towards Ichiraku's. Iruka followed him, already feeling his wallet getting lighter. He would have to hold another funeral for it tonight. Chapter 6. Graduation and Revelation. Konoha 12 years after Kyuubi attack. For once in his life, Naruto Uzumaki woke up before his alarm clock, something that has been prophesied to bring about the end of the world. Besides him not eating ramen. Of course, it may have to do with the fact that he was going to graduate from the academy today and earn his headband alongside the rest of his classmates. Naruto, getting more and more excited, jumped out of bed and ran out to his balcony where he held out his arms and felt the cool breeze touch over his skin. After observing the rising sun illuminate Konoha some more, he walked back in to see that his breakfast was already made, and Fox sitting next to the table. Naruto grinned as he looked at Fox. He had finally found a way to make his heart have a little bit of a personality. It was difficult, but being Naruto, he didn't give up until he got something. Thankfully, it was something positive. All it took was installing a bunch of commands into the threads that were connected to the heart. It was a long and tiring process, mostly due to the fact that he wanted Fox to act like a fox and have a little human qualities, like cleaning and such. After eating his cereal, he called Fox back into his body. He had decided to sleep with his heart out, mostly because it was very uncomfortable when he went on his back. Naruto then put on his trenchcoat and walked out the door. He then made his way to the Hyuga compound. "Hyuga compound, aren't you early, Naruto-san?" one of the guards asked as he and his partner watched the young Uzumaki approach. "Yeah, I'm just a little excited today," Naruto told them. "Today's the day I become a ninja." "Good luck then, we hope that you make it," the other guard said as he gave the blonde a small smile. After walking past the gate guards, he was waiting by the front porch of the house that Hinata's family stayed. He dozed off after a while of waiting as he sat on a small bench. He groggily awoke sometime later to an anpying tapping on his shoulder. After getting up and rubbing away the sleep from his eyes, he looked around to see that nobody was within his sight. "Boo!" A small white sheet with eye holes yelled as it popped up in front of Naruto. "Ghost!" Naruto screamed as he jumped into the air and grabbed onto the roof of the porch, digging a few tendrils into it to keep him up there. Suddenly, the sheet began to giggle before it was pulled up to reveal a smiling Hanabi. "Got you, Nato ni-san," Hanabi said while giggling. Naruto groaned while he separated himself from the roof and landed in front of the giggling girl while sporting an evil smile. "So little Hanabi-chan likes to laugh him," Naruto thought out loud as he took small steps towards the young Hyuga. Hanabi's eyes went wide as she started to back up, realizing what Naruto was about to do. However, she found that she couldn't move and looked down to see that Naruto had sent some threads to wrap around her legs while she was distracted. "Nato ni-san, I'll be a good girl," Hanabi said as she felt some more threads wrap around her arms and hold them up while some others wiggled slowly down her arms and into her shirt. "Naruto-kun, as much as I would hate to ruin your and Hanabi-chan's fun, we really need to go to the Academy," Hinata said as she stepped out onto the porch while slightly hiding behind the door. Naruto sighed and retracted the threads, letting Hanabi go as she ran up to her sister and hugged her. "Thank you, Nei-chan. Nato ni-san was going to make me too tired for training again," Hanabi said. "Maybe you should remember that it's not nice to play with people's fears," Hiyashi said as he appeared behind the sisters. "Unless it's someone you don't like." Naruto then put on a triumphant grin and said, "Yeah, maybe I'll put on an octopus costume and wait for you to wake up. If you did that, you'll probably end up with a Juken palm strike to the stomach," Hiyashi pointed out. "Hanabi is one of those people who attack when scared. Unlike you who decides to go and inspect roofs." Naruto just gave Hiyashi a small glare before he huffed and turned around. Hiyashi just chuckled and ushered both him and Hinata out to the Academy and sent Hanabi inside. "You know you want a son," Hitomi said as she gave him a small smile. "I did, after Hinata, but I'm happy with my daughters," Hiyashi told her. "Besides, it's entertaining to mess with Naruto once in a while. It's like watching Kushina all over again." Hitomi giggled and said, "Except there's no pile of boys who can't keep their mouths closed every 2 blocks. Hiyashi groaned and said, "Don't remind me, I was in one of those piles at least 3 times a week." "Hizashi was the smarter of you two," Hitomi said. "I remember the amusement on his face when he would have to drag you home after running into Kushi-chan. The elders kept belittling me for being beaten by a worthless nobody every time it happened," the Hyuga had muttered. "Remind me why they're still here?" Hitomi asked. "Because the stick that they all have seems to grant them with extended life," Hiyashi told her. Academy. Naruto and Hinata entered the classroom to see that they were still a little early. The only people there were Shikamaru, Choji, Shino, and a few other kids who were unimportant. The duo took their seats in front of Shikamaru and Choji. As usual, the Nara was sleeping and the Akamichi was chomping on a bag of chips. "Hey guys, what's up?" Naruto greeted as he sat down. "Hi Naruto, Hinata, everything's fine, I'm just a little nervous about this exam," Choji said. "I mean, what if I fail?" "Troublesome, you're not going to fail Choji," Shikamaru said as he laid his head on his arms and looked at his round friend. "All you need to do is stay calm and do your best." "Yeah, what Shikamaru said, Datbeo." Naruto agreed. "Why you'll do fine Choji-kun," Hinata reassured the Akamichi. Choji visibly relaxed and said, "Thanks guys, I really needed that." While the 3 friends were talking, several more people walked into the room after them. Including Sasuke and Kiba, though the latter was sporting a small bruise on his cheek. "Whoa, what happened to you man?" Naruto asked. "I got into an argument with one of my clan members, and it kinda got to the point where we were throwing punches," Kiba explained as he rubbed the back of his head, making sure not to knock Akamaru off of his spot. Naruto was able to get Kiba to warm up to him and got the dog lover to join him and his friends whenever they hung out. "What were you guys arguing about?" Choji asked. Kiba sighed and said, "Which dog food would be better for our partners?" "Really? Fighting over something like that is so troublesome," Shikamaru said as he readjusted his head so it was facing Kiba, but still laying down. It was at that moment that the whole building began to shake, causing everyone to grab onto something to keep steady. "What is this? An earthquake?" Kiba cried as he held onto the desk for dear life. "I don't think so," It doesn't seem like a normal one. Choji yelled as he tried to keep himself steady. How would you know what a real earthquake is and what isn't? Naruto cried. I'll tell you later. Choji yelled as he grabbed a flying bag of chips with his teeth. Hinata had then lost her grip on the desk after another violent shake and was about to hit her head on the floor when Naruto reached out and grabbed her by her midriff and held her tightly against his body. If she wasn't so frightened at the moment, she might have fainted with happy thoughts. First, suddenly, the door flew open and the shaking stopped. Everyone looked over to see that Ino and Sakura were arguing about who got to the academy first, the winner getting the right to sit next to Sasuke. Everyone sighed, relieved that it wasn't a real earthquake, and annoyed that the two females had practically gave them some heart attacks. I almost had a heart attack, Naruto sighed. He then realized that he was holding Hinata next to him, who had fainted when she realized her position. Naruto placed her back into her seat, but if one looked closely, they would have seen a small blush on his cheeks. Wow, she's so soft and no bad thoughts. Naruto shook his head to get his head clear. Shikamaru sighed and sank back into his seat. I can't believe they made me do something as troublesome as preparing for an earthquake. Yeah, saving your own life is so troublesome, Kiba told him while rolling his eyes, getting some of the people nearby to chuckle. Shikamaru just shrugged it off and went back to sleep with a snore. Naruto, deciding to wake Hinata up, took out one of the emergency cinnamon buns and waved it underneath Hinata's nose. Her eyes popped open and, quick as lightning, snatched the item out of Naruto's hand before devouring it. Welcome back to the land of the living, Choji joked as he watched the ordeal. He would have tried to take the cinnamon bun before Naruto waved it under the Hyuga's nose, but remembered the last time he tried that. The jukin is something that's very painful. Everyone sit down and shut up. Iruka yelled as he walked into the room and used his big head Judas to get everyone's attention. After everyone sat down, Iruka took his place in the front of the room and addressed the class. Today we're going to be holding the graduation exams to see who is able to become a shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato. The exam will be conducted in 4 parts, a written test, kunai and shuriken, a taijutsu endurance test, and performing the 3 basic jutsu that all shinobi know how to use. We'll begin once Mizuki decides to get here with the written test. Naruto was only a little scared. Written tests weren't his forte, nor were they his worst. It was just that he preferred to do active works instead of writing things down. A few minutes later, Mizuki came into the classroom with a small box in his arms. Sorry I'm late, Iruka. I had misplaced the box, so I tore up the room looking for it, Mizuki said as he rubbed his head sheepishly. Iruka waved him off and said, just hand me the box so I can pass them out. Mizuki nodded and handed the box to Iruka while cursing on the inside. He was supposed to pass them out so he could place a genjutsu on the demon brat's test. After the written test was over, seriously, who cares about written tests? The only one that matters is the one in the Chunin exams. Everyone went outside to prepare for the next test. The one where they would throw kunai and shuriken at the target and try to earn as much points as possible. Okay, I'll call you guys up alphabetical order. Sashino's up first, Iruka said as he grabbed a clipboard to keep score. Shino walked up to the starting point and grabbed 10 kunai and shuriken. He first threw the kunai, half of them hitting a bullseye, and 2 of them hitting the target ring. He then moved on to the next target and threw his shuriken. 6 had hit their bullseye and 1 had hit the target. Good work, Shino. Next up is Choji, Iruka said as he marked down Shino's score. Choji walked up and grabbed his own set of kunai and shuriken. For the kunai, 3 of them hit the bullseye while 3 more hit the target. With the shuriken, 4 of them hit the bullseye and 2 more hit the target. Nice job. Next is Sakura, Iruka announced. Watch me, Sasuke-kun. The pink bands, Sakura screeched as she grabbed the weaponry and began to throw them. Everyone held their ears to prevent them from bleeding. Sakura prepared to throw the kunai and wait. Why am I telling you guys about her? Who cares? She just passed with the bare minimum that was needed to pass. Now let's move on to the important people. Next is Hinata, Iruka said, not really paying attention to Sakura. That was until she almost took off a chunk of his hair with a kunai. He was about ready to fail her for almost ruining his fashion, but was able to keep himself under control. Don't worry, Hinata-chan, you'll do great. Naruto reassured the timid heiress as she approached the throwing point. Hinata took a deep breath and grabbed her set of kunai and shuriken. For the kunai, all of them hit her target while 7 of them hit the bullseye. With the shuriken, only 8 of them hit the target, and all of them hit the bullseye. Great job Hinata, Iruka praised. Hinata blushed under his praise and walked back to where her friends were. As she looked down to hide her blush, she bumped into someone, and looked up to see the smiling face of Naruto. That was great Hinata-chan. Naruto said. Hinata turned into a tomato and stuttered a thanks as she turned away and watched the others as they did their exam. Kiba, you're up next, Iruka said as he watched the young Inuzuka race towards the starting point and grabbed a set of kunai and shuriken. Kiba did decently with the weapons, considering the fact that his clan likes to be up close and personal when fighting. He got 5 bullseyes with the kunai, and 3 hits in the target area. He got 4 bullseye with the shuriken and had 2 hits in the target area. Good job Kiba. Next is Shikamaru. Troublesome. Let's get this over with, Shikamaru muttered as he trudged forward. He grabbed the set and began to throw them. He got 3 bullseyes and 3 hits with the kunai, and 5 bullseyes and 2 hits with the shuriken. The only reason he put any effort into it was because he didn't want to have his score anywhere near Sakura's. Good work Shikamaru. Sasuke, you're next, Iruka said as he marked down the Nara's score. Sasuke said as he walked forward and grabbed his set. He threw all of his weapons and got all bullseyes with each one. Excellent Sasuke, Iruka praised, but he couldn't be heard over all of the screaming that all of Sasuke's fangirls did. Sasuke grunted as walked back to his corner to fantasize about killing Itachi. The only reason Sasuke won was because Itachi was sick and he didn't want to kill his little brother. Naruto, it's your turn, Iruka said as he watched the young blonde step forward. Yosh, I'm up, Datbeo, Naruto cried as he grabbed his set of kunai and shuriken. For the junai, 8 of them hit the bullseye and the other 2 hit close to it. 9 of his shuriken hit the bullseye and the last one missed when it bounced off of another one, but it still hit the target. Great job Naruto, Iruka said as he watched the blonde cheer. That was GG great Naruto-kun. Hinata softly exclaimed. It wasn't it? Naruto asked with a smile on his face. Yeah, but you didn't get the best score, Choji pointed out. Naruto shrugged his shoulders and said, so, as long as I pass, it's good enough for me. Last one up is Ino, Iruka said. The young Yamanaka walked up and grabbed her set of kunai and shuriken. When she threw her kunai, she was able to get 5 bullseye and 2 hits in the target. For the shuriken, she got 5 bullseye and 3 hits. That's it for this part of the exam, Iruka said. Now let's move on to the training area for the taijutsu portion of the exam. Everyone started to move towards the taijutsu field where Mizuki was finishing up some stretches. Alright, this exam is going to be fairly simple, Iruka said as he stood in front of the group. You guys are going to have matches against Mizuki here. The goal is to last at least 2 minutes against him. Once the 2 minutes are up, you can quit. Now let's get started. Because I'm lazy, we're going to skip everyone and go straight to Naruto. Why? Because I'm the author and I say so. Okay Naruto, you're up, Iruka said as he watched Sasuke stalk off of the field and go back into his little fantasy world where he stood on top of 20 Itachi corpses. Let's get started, Datbeo, Naruto exclaimed as he jumped into the field and faced Mizuki. Mizuki smirked and said, well aren't you confident? This is going to be easy. All I have to do is knock him out of the ring. Naruto grinned and got into his personal stance before he stared down Mizuki. Mizuki started off the match by dashing towards Naruto and aiming a punch towards his head. Naruto ducked underneath it and threw a fist towards Mizuki's side. The academy teacher retreated to gain some distance, but Naruto raced forward to keep him from getting any room. Naruto threw a punch towards Mizuki's stomach, and the Chunin turned to the side to let Naruto's hit fly past him while he went to knee the student in the stomach. The hit sent Naruto back towards the edge of the ring. Oi, Mizuki-sensei, that was a little hard, Naruto said as he hunched over a little. Well, you can expect your enemies to hit you harder when you're out on a mission, Mizuki replied. Naruto smirked and said, then let's keep going, this little thing isn't going to stop me. Naruto raced forward and aimed a kick at Mizuki. The Chunin grabbed the outstretched leg and proceeded to throw Naruto away. The Uzumaki landed dangerously close to Tei edge and almost fell out until he caught himself and regained his balance. Mizuki then charged towards Naruto and threw a punch towards him in an attempt to send him out of the ring. Naruto twisted his body and went to punch him out of the ring. Time. Iruka yelled as his watch signaled 2 minutes. Naruto jumped back and wiped the small amount of sweat from his brow. Phew, that was intense, Mizuki-sensei. Naruto said. Mizuki nodded his head, but was screaming in anger on the inside. Another chance was lost. Later, once everyone had finished with their taijutsu matches, Iruka had moved everyone inside where they would finish up with the ninjutsu exam. They would wait in one room before being called into a separate room for testing. Naruto was standing in front of Iruka and Mizuki where they sat at the desk with a small row of headbands with them. Despite his confidence, Naruto was slightly fidgeting with a little nervousness in the back of his head. Okay Naruto, you just need to perform the 3 basic ninjutsu, Iruka began, meaning that you have to do a henge, kawarimi, and make at least 3 bunshin. Got it? Yeah, let's do this. Naruto cried, making the 2 academy instructors chuckle. If only we could grade him on his confidence, Mizuki muttered, keeping up his nice guy act. First, henge into the sandame and act like him for a few seconds, Iruka said. Got it, henge. Naruto transformed into Hiruzen Sarutobi perfectly and stared down at the 2 instructors. Iruka, the transformed Naruto began in Hiruzen's voice, you should really think about becoming a Junin sensei one of these days. You too Mizuki. After that, Naruto poofed back into himself while sporting a wide grin. Good job Naruto, Mizuki said while straining his smile to make it look sincere. Okay, next we'll do the kawarimi, ready? Iruka asked as he prepared to throw a blunted kunai at the blonde. Yup, let me have it, Naruto said. Iruka chucked the kunai at Naruto and it hit the blonde in the chest. Naruto's eyes went wide before white smoke erupted around him and revealed himself to be a wooden log. The real Naruto came out of the closet that was behind where he was standing. Praise the log, Naruto said while holding his hands in a small prayer. Amen, both Iruka and Mizuki said as they did a small prayer as well. Now I just have to do some bunshins, right? Naruto asked. Iruka nodded and said, you just have to do at least 3. Okay, here I go. Datbayo, Naruto exclaimed as he made the hand seal and a cloud of smoke blinded the room. We really need to do something about how much smoke you use, Iruka said as he waved the smoke out the window. Once the smoke was clear, Iruka looked back to see 5 Narutos standing before him. Excellent Naruto, you're now an official ninja of Konoha, Iruka praised as he handed Naruto his headband. Haha, I did it Datbayo, Naruto cheered as he grabbed his headband and ran out the room. Oh great, now I'm going to have to change my plan, Mizuki thought as he closed his eyes in frustration, Iruka oblivious to his friend's thoughts. Naruto ran out of the room and raced out of the building to see all the people who had graduated and were showing off to their parents. As he walked over to where Hinata and her guard Ko would be waiting, he heard people whispering about him. I can't believe they let that thing graduate. How could they let it become more powerful? After all, he's quiet. You know it's forbidden to talk about it. Naruto just shrugged off the comments and walked over to where his blue-haired friend was. Hinata beamed upon seeing Naruto with a headband around his forehead. Naruto saw the headband that Hinata had around her neck, and in the back of his head, thought that she looked cute with it like that. I'm so glad that you passed Naruto-kun, Hinata said as she gave him a soft smile. Hee, yeah, now we can go on missions and become awesome ninja, Naruto said. Naruto-san, Ko began, Hiyashi-sama and Hitomi-sama have invited you to join them for dinner in celebration of your graduation. Really? That sounds great, Naruto said as he smiled brightly. Later that night, training ground 27. Naruto had left the Hyuga compound after a large, filling dinner and decided to visit his private training grounds for a small trip down memory lane. He remembered making all those slash marks and drilling holes in the trees and chuckled as he remembered every time he got frustrated when it wouldn't work. But now he was highly skilled with his Jongu, and there was still so much to learn. He was broken out of his thoughts when he heard some fighting in the distance. Now being at one of Konoha's training grounds, this wasn't anything unusual, but it was strange for people to be out here at this time of the day. Naruto ran through the woods and crawled through some bushes when he saw who was there. In front of him was Mizuki and Iruka. The former was twirling a giant shuriken in one hand while another one was strapped to his back. Iruka was pinned to the tree by several shuriken. Next to him was a large scroll. "Why are you betraying us, Mizuki?" Iruka yelled. Naruto was shocked. One of his instructors was betraying the village he had sworn to serve. "Because Iruka, this village is falling to pieces," Mizuki began. "The wise Hokage lets a monster run free in our village and then has the nerve to tell us that it's a human like us." "You're delusional," Iruka yelled. "Maybe I am in your eyes, but your opinion won't matter when you're dead." Mizuki yelled as he threw the shuriken he was twirling towards Iruka. Naruto jumped out of the bushes and caught the shuriken by the middle ring before throwing it away. Naruto," Iruka cried as he saw the blonde appear in front of him. "Iruka-sensei, are you alright?" Naruto asked as he kept his eye on Mizuki, who appeared to be surprised by Naruto's interference as well. Mizuki got out of his shock and said, "Well, what do we have here? The demon brats decided to show up as well. Now I can blame you for Iruka's death before I kill you and get rid of your filth." Naruto growled and said, "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, remember it, you tem." "Naruto, you have to get away from here," Iruka yelled. "I'm not going to leave you here, Iruka-sensei," Naruto declared. Mizuki smirked and said, "Say Naruto, do you want to know why everyone hates you?" Naruto froze and looked at Mizuki with curious eyes, making the traitor almost laugh at how innocent the demon tried to appear. "Don't do it, Mizuki," Iruka yelled. "It's forbidden. You see, 12 years ago, the Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked the village and was defeated by the Yondaime, who sacrificed himself in the process," Mizuki said. Naruto looked at him and asked, "What does this have to do with anything?" "After the attack, a law was made. A law that everyone except you knows about," Mizuki said. "What law?" Naruto asked, almost afraid to find out. "Mizuki, shut up," Iruka yelled in vain. "A law that hid the fact that you are the Kyuubi reborn. Now die, you damn fox," Mizuki cried as he threw his last giant shuriken. Naruto was frozen in shock at the revelation and didn't even register what Mizuki just did. He then heard the sound of flesh being ripped and some blood falling on his face. Naruto looked up to see the smiling face of Iruka. "Hey," Iruka began while a small trail of blood trailed down his lips. "You all right, Naruto?" It was at this time that Naruto realized that his sensei had ripped himself free and used his body to shield the blonde. "Iruka-sensei," Naruto whispered as he shook in fear. Am I really the Kyuubi?" "No," Iruka said as he shook his head, "you just contain it. I admit, I hate the Kyuubi, but I don't hate Naruto Uzumaki, the future Hokage of Konoha." With that statement, Iruka ripped out the shuriken that was in him and threw it to the side. Naruto was at tears at this point and a few had made their way down his cheeks. My, how touching," Mizuki mocked. "Now let's get to the part where I kill you both already." Mizuki then lunged forward, kunai in hand, and went to stab Iruka in the back of the head. However, he found that he couldn't move as soon as he got within 5 feet of the Chunin. He looked towards his arm and saw crimson threads wrapped around him. He followed the trail of them and was shocked when he saw them disappearing into Naruto's skin. "If you ever attack my sensei again, I'll kill you," Naruto growled as his threads squirmed through the air. Demon," Mizuki yelled as he struggled to get away from the threads. Naruto threw the traitorous Chunin into a tree and began to stitch up the wound on Iruka's back. Once he was satisfied with his work, he turned around and watched as Mizuki trembled while holding a kunai in his direction. "All traitors to Konoha must be killed," Naruto said in an emotionless voice as he took off his trenchcoat and handed it to Iruka, who took it and watched Naruto as he slowly walked forward to Mizuki. "Jongu! Activate!" Naruto shouted as he put his hands into the Tora seal. Fox had come out of his back and slowly walked towards Mizuki along with Naruto. "Doden! Earth Flow Spears!" Mizuki yelled as he slammed his hands into the ground. A wave of rock-made spears shot out of the ground and made their way to Naruto and Fox. Both of the thread users jumped out of the way and landed in the trees where Naruto started to make several hand seals. Kaden. Fire bullet jutsu. Naruto yelled as he and Fox began to shoot several small fireballs at Mizuki. The former academy instructor jumped away and looked around frantically for his opponents. He threw a kunai into the tree where he saw a flash of crimson, but only ended up hitting the tree. He backed up against a tree and grabbed one of his giant shuriken that was nearby. Kaden. Fireball jutsu. Naruto shouted as he and Fox simultaneously blew out fireballs that were about their size. Mizuki jumped into the trees and landed on a branch when Fox leapt at him and tried to slice him with its claws. The traitor jumped back, only to be sent flying forward by Naruto, who had kicked the traitor in the back. Naruto landed in front of Mizuki, and Fox landed behind him. Stay away, Mizuki yelled as he held the giant shuriken out in front of him like a shield. Naruto just ignored him and held out his arms as several tendrils shot towards him and wrapped him up. But Mizuki then fell apart into mud. Iwa Bunshin, Naruto muttered as he looked around for Mizuki. Doden. Earth Fist. Mizuki yelled as he appeared behind Naruto and attempted to slam his rock-covered fist into the blonde's head. Naruto was hit and crumpled into the ground before he erupted into smoke. What? Cage Bunshin, Mizuki exclaimed. He then jumped to the side as the real Naruto slammed his fist into the ground where he stood. Fox then blew out a fireball at Mizuki once Naruto was out of its range. Doden. Doryuheki. Mizuki slammed his hands on the ground and a wall of stone rose up and defended him from the fire. Jongu. Threading needles. Naruto cried as he shot threads towards Mizuki and wrapped him up in them. This time, it was the real one that was captured. Let me go, Kyuubi, Mizuki yelled. Naruto gave him a cold glare and said, "No, you're going to get what traitors deserve." Well said, Naruto-kun. Everyone turned to see Hiruzen standing there along with Tsunade 6 Anbu with him. How long have you been here, Jiji, Ba-chan? Naruto asked. Tsunade put a hand to his chin and said, about the same time the Mizuki clone fell to pieces. Ah, you missed all of my cool jutsu, Naruto whined as he tightened his grip on Mizuki. He then looked back over to his prisoner and asked, do you need this guy for interrogation or anything? Hiruzen shook his head and said, no, he was foolish enough to write his plans out and failed to burn everything before he left his apartment. So we know who he was working for and that there was nobody else involved in this. He even wrote down the place that he was going to drop off the scroll at. Naruto's face lightly lit up and he asked, does that mean that I can take it? Yes, Mizuki is now useless to us when it comes to information, Hiruzen said. Naruto turned around and faced Mizuki with an unnerving smile on his face. Mizuki struggled harder to get away, but the threads were very tight. Naruto raised his free arm and aimed it at Mizuki, or more precisely, his chest. Several threads shot out and impacted against Mizuki's chest before they began to dig into him. Mizuki let out screams of pain, but only Naruto and Iruka were affected. Naruto because this was only the second time he did it, and Iruka because Mizuki used to be his friend. But now that Iruka thought about it, Mizuki rarely acted friendly in the past. Mizuki's screams stopped once the threads began to pull something out of him. First they ripped off his Chunin vest and part of his shirt before a moving object was hanging in the air. Once the threads disconnected from Mizuki, he dropped down to the ground, dead. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment as a pulse of blue chakra traveled up to the heart and engulfed it for a moment. He opened his eyes and said, it's a earth element. Iruka-sensei, can you throw me the scroll in my coat pocket? Iruka, still stunned by the event, just nodded dumbly and threw Naruto the scroll. The Uzumaki opened it up and pressed his hand on the kanji for earth and pushed some chakra into it. From the scroll came a squarish mask that had a slightly open mouth and yellow markings on it. Naruto placed the mask on the heart and everyone watched as more crimson threads began to wrap around the heart and began to take the shape of a humanoid figure. The mass of threads fell to the floor and became a tall figure, about 7 feet high, with thick arms that had 4-fingered hands. Thick legs came from the bottom and allowed the creature to stand on its own. The mask settled on the middle of the chest, right between its large shoulders. I really need some of you people to draw for me. As I said before, on my profile, I am a horrible artist. Can someone please help me? Everyone, meet Titan. Naruto introduced the crimson construct as it took a bow. Very interesting, Naruto, Tsunade said as she inspected the creature. I assume that it's going to be a defense type for you. Naruto shrugged and said, more or less. Depends on the type of ninja I fight. Hiruzen was confused. What do you mean? He asked. Well, remember Iruka-sensei saying the water is weak to earth, so I'll fight water users with Titan since he'll be able to beat them easily. Iruka laughed and said, so you really do remember my boring lectures, you brat. Naruto placed his hands behind his head and said, well, you do repeat them about 3 times a year. Iruka blushed and looked away in embarrassment. The Anbu had taken Mizuki's body away for examination of any items on him, to see whether they had any connection to who he was originally working for. Good work, Naruto. You'll receive a B rank payment for this later. I'll give it to you when you come in to take your picture for your ID card, Hiruzen said. Anbu, take Iruka to the hospital for proper treatment. Tsunade, go with them. I'll take Naruto to get some ramen. It's about time for my break anyway. Yay, ramen. Naruto cheered as he ran around the Hokage happily. Everyone, except the Anbu, chuckled at the Uzumaki's antics before they went about their business. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.